Admiral Taehyun's hand moved toward his sidearm but stopped halfway. Even his anger was no match for the growing influence of Verdania's peaceful energy. Around him, his bridge crew watched with calm expressions as their commander struggled against forces he didn't understand. "They've poisoned your mind," Taehyun said to Jiwon, but his voice lacked its usual strength. "You've forgotten your duty to humanity." "No, sir," Jiwon replied. "I've remembered what humanity should be. The Velkari aren't our enemies. They could have destroyed us the moment we entered their system, but they chose to heal us instead." Through the bridge's main viewer, both men could see the disabled fleet drifting helplessly in space. Troop transports that should have been preparing for planetary assault were instead broadcasting requests for cultural exchange. Weapons platforms designed for orbital bombardment had become observation posts for studying alien architecture. "Look at our people," Jiwon continued. "They're not under enemy control. They're experiencing what it feels like to live without the fear and anger that drive us to war. For the first time in their lives, they understand peace." Admiral Taehyun wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. The rage that had sustained him through decades of military campaigns was fading like morning mist. In its place came something he had almost forgotten: the curiosity and wonder he had felt as a young officer exploring the stars. On screens throughout the bridge, reports flooded in from across the fleet. Colonel Yoonji from the Assault Division requested permission to study Velkari biotechnology instead of attacking their cities. Commander Donghyun from the Orbital Bombardment Group asked if his people could tour the floating cities to learn about their construction. Fighter pilots who had trained for aerial supremacy now wanted to understand how the aliens made their aircraft from living tissue. "Sir," the communications officer said gently, "the aliens are requesting a formal meeting. They want to establish a permanent diplomatic relationship between our species." Taehyun closed his eyes, feeling the last of his military conditioning slip away. When he opened them again, he looked older and somehow more human. "What are they offering?" he asked quietly. Jiwon stepped forward. "Partnership, Admiral. They want to share technology and knowledge. They're offering to teach us their methods of biotechnology, energy production, and peaceful conflict resolution. In return, they want to learn about human creativity, our drive to explore, and our ability to adapt. And if I refuse, then they'll send us home," Jiwon said. "Our weapons will remain disabled, our aggressive impulses suppressed until we leave their system. They won't hurt us, but they won't let us hurt them either." Around the bridge, the crew listened to this exchange with growing hope. The idea of returning to Earth as failures was painful, but the possibility of genuine partnership with an advanced alien civilization was exciting beyond measure. Admiral Taehyun walked to the main viewer and stared at the planet below. Verdania hung in space like a living jewel, its floating cities moving slowly through clouds that glowed with bioluminescent beauty. It was nothing like the primitive world Earth's intelligence had described. "How do I explain this to Earth Command?" he asked finally. "You tell them the truth," Jiwon replied. "That we found something better than another world to conquer. We found a civilization that can teach us to be better than we are." The Admiral's shoulders sagged as the weight of decision settled on him. His entire career had been built on military conquest, but standing here in the peaceful influence of an alien world, that life seemed hollow and meaningless. "Open a channel to all ships," he ordered. "Fleet-wide communication." As his image appeared on screens throughout the Armada, Admiral Taehyun looked directly into the camera. "This is Admiral Taehyun to all vessels. Our mission parameters have changed. We came here to establish a colony through force. Instead, we have been offered something far more valuable, a chance to learn from a civilization that has solved the problems that still plague humanity." He paused, gathering strength for words that would end his military career but possibly save both species. "Effective immediately, all military operations are suspended. We will establish peaceful diplomatic relations with the Velkari and explore opportunities for mutual cooperation. Anyone who objects to this change in mission will be returned to Earth on the next available transport. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the fleet, crew members cheered the decision. Soldiers put down weapons they no longer wanted to carry. Scientists prepared for the greatest research opportunity in human history. Even the most hardened veterans felt relief at abandoning a mission that had never felt right. Over the following weeks, a new relationship began to form between humans and Velkari. Transport shuttles moved constantly between the fleet and Verdania's surface, carrying diplomats, scientists, and cultural ambassadors in both directions. Minho found himself leading a team of human researchers studying Velkari biotechnology. The aliens were generous teachers, sharing knowledge that would revolutionize human medicine, engineering, and environmental science. In return, they were fascinated by human creativity and adaptability. Hana became the chief translator for the new diplomatic corps. Her work with the Velkari communication crystals led to breakthrough developments in interspecies linguistics. She helped establish protocols that would eventually allow direct thought sharing between humans and aliens. Jiwan was promoted to Director of Human Velkari Relations, tasked with building the foundation for long-term cooperation. He worked closely with this to create exchange programs, research partnerships, and cultural initiatives that benefited both species. The transformation wasn't without challenges. News of the mission's failure reached Earth months later, causing political upheaval and military reorganization. Some factions called for Admiral Taehyun's court-martial and the crew's punishment for betraying humanity's interests. But other voices spoke louder. The scientific community was thrilled by the flood of new knowledge coming from Verdania. Environmentalists saw hope in Velkari bioengineering techniques that could heal Earth's damaged ecosystems. Peace advocates pointed to the success of diplomacy over military force. A new organization emerged from the chaos, the Human Velkari Cooperation Initiative. Led by the crew of the original mission, it advocated for peaceful expansion into space and cooperation with alien civilizations. Their motto, suggested by Thys himself, was simple: grow together or fall alone. The Harmony, its weapons permanently removed and its hull converted for pure research, became the flagship of humanity's new approach to space exploration. Captain Jiwan stood on its bridge as it prepared for departure to another star system, where radio signals suggested intelligent life. Beside him stood Thys, who had volunteered to serve as alien ambassador to other species they might encounter. The Velkari leader had learned to appreciate human determination and curiosity, while helping to temper humanity's aggressive impulses with wisdom earned through millennia of peace. "Are you ready for another first contact?" Thys asked through their now perfect mental link. Jiwan smiled as he looked at his mixed crew of humans and Velkari working together in harmony. "I think we're finally ready to do it right." The Harmony engaged its hybrid biomechanical engines, a perfect fusion of human engineering and Velkari biotechnology, and jumped toward the stars. Behind them, Verdania glowed peacefully in space, its cities singing with the joy of species learning to understand each other. On Earth, debates raged about humanity's future in space, but among the stars a new model was taking shape, one based on cooperation instead of conquest, understanding instead of domination, and the revolutionary idea that the universe was big enough for everyone to grow together. The age of human empire was ending. The age of galactic community had begun. The Earth fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm breaking over Verdania. 237 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons and armor. At their head flew the massive dreadnought Conquest, Admiral Taehyun's flagship bristling with enough firepower to level a continent. From the observation deck of Lumenspire, Jiwan watched the arrival with growing dread. The fleet's formation was purely military, battle groups surrounding troop transports with destroyer escorts protecting the vulnerable colony ships. There was nothing peaceful about this force. "Admiral Taehyun didn't listen to your message," Hana said quietly. Her translation crystal picked up waves of concern from the Velkari around them. Thys joined them at the viewing area, his crystalline form darker than usual. "Your people have chosen their path. Now they will learn the consequences." The first sign of trouble came from the fleet's communications array. Ships that had been maintaining perfect formation suddenly began drifting apart as their navigation systems failed. Emergency beacons started broadcasting distress signals as electronic systems across the entire fleet began shutting down. On the Conquest's bridge, Admiral Tae-hyun stared at displays showing system failures throughout his command. A career military officer with decades of experience, he had conquered 3 star systems and subjugated a dozen primitive civilizations. He had never seen anything like this. "Sir, all weapon systems are offline," reported his tactical officer. "Engines are running at minimal power. Long-range sensors have gone dark." "How is this possible?" Tae-hyun demanded. "We're not under attack. There are no enemy ships in range." But even as he spoke, the admiral began to feel strange. The anger and determination that had driven him through countless battles was fading, replaced by an unfamiliar sense of peace. Around him, other officers reported similar feelings. Throughout the fleet, the same phenomenon was spreading. Soldiers who had trained for years to conquer alien worlds found their aggression melting away. Weapons specialists discovered they could no longer bear the thought of using their deadly tools. Pilots who had bombed enemy cities now felt overwhelming empathy for all living things. Down on Verdania's surface, the planetary defense system was fully active for the first time in 10,000 years. Deep beneath the crust, massive crystal formations pulsed with energy that flowed through every living thing on the planet. The trees, the soil, even the air itself had become part of a vast network designed to protect all life. "What are they doing to us?" asked Commander Suki from the troop transport Freedom. Her soldiers had been preparing for planetary assault, but now they sat in their barracks discussing philosophy and the meaning of existence. This explained the process to Ji-won and his companions. "Verdania is teaching your people to feel what we feel. The planet is sharing the emotional experience of peace, empathy, and connection to all life. Your soldiers cannot fight because they now understand the pain that violence causes." Minho watched the fleet's helpless ships drift in space. "This is incredible. You're not destroying them. You're healing them." "Violence is a sickness," Thais replied. "Like any disease, it can be cured with the right treatment. Your people will not be harmed, but they will no longer be able to harm others." Admiral Tae-hyun tried everything he could think of to restore his fleet's combat capability. He ordered engineers to restart weapon systems, commanded his troops to prepare for battle, and threatened court-martial for anyone who failed to follow orders. But his commands fell on deaf ears. The change was too profound for military discipline to overcome. Soldiers who had spent their lives learning to kill now found the idea repulsive. Officers who had built careers on conquest now questioned the entire purpose of their mission. On the bridge of the Conquest, Tae-hyun found himself alone in his rage as his crew experienced emotional transformation. He watched his life's work crumbling around him as the fleet he had built for war became incapable of violence. "Sir," his communications officer said with unusual gentleness, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. The aliens want to talk." Tae-hyun wanted to refuse, but he had no choice. His fleet was powerless, his weapons useless, his soldiers converted to pacifists. With growing humiliation, he accepted the alien communication. Thais's voice filled the bridge through the translation system that Hana had helped develop. "Admiral, we welcome you to our world. We invite you to join us in peaceful discussion about the future of both our species." "You've done something to my people," Tae-hyun said through gritted teeth. "This is an act of war. This is an act of healing," Thais replied calmly. "Your people came here planning violence and conquest. We have simply reminded them of their capacity for peace and compassion. The change is not permanent, it will fade in time. But while it lasts, no one will be hurt." Around the bridge, Tae-hyun's officers listened to this exchange with growing understanding. The fog of aggression that had driven their mission was lifting, replaced by clarity about what they had really come to do. "Admiral," his second-in-command said quietly, "maybe we should listen to them. Maybe there's a better way than conquest." Tae-hyun turned on his subordinate with fury. "These aliens have brainwashed you. Can't you see what they've done? But even as he spoke, the Admiral felt his own anger beginning to fade. The planetary influence was strong, affecting everyone within the system. His lifetime of military conditioning fought against the growing sense of peace, but it was a losing battle. On Verdania's surface, Jiwan made a crucial decision. I need to talk to Admiral Taihyun directly, face to face. If I can explain what's really happening here, maybe we can find a solution. Thais considered this request. It is dangerous. Your Admiral still resists our planet's influence. His anger could overcome the peaceful effects if he sees you as a traitor. It's a risk I have to take, Jiwan said. I'm still a member of Earth's military. Maybe he'll listen to me. A shuttle was prepared to carry Jiwan to the conquest. As it launched from Verdania's surface, every system aboard functioned perfectly. The planetary network recognized his peaceful intentions and allowed normal operations. During the flight to the flagship, Jiwan rehearsed what he would say. He had to convince Taehyun that cooperation was better than conquest, that the Velkari offered partnership rather than submission. Most importantly, he had to help the Admiral understand that the mission had failed not because of military defeat, but because it had been wrong from the beginning. The shuttle docked with the conquest without resistance. Taehyun's crew, now filled with peaceful intentions, welcomed Jiwan aboard and escorted him to the bridge. Admiral Taehyun stood alone at the center of his command deck, surrounded by officers who no longer shared his vision of conquest. When he saw Jiwan, the last of his anger flared brightly. Captain Jiwan, he said with cold rage, I should have you shot for treason. Admiral, Jiwan replied carefully, I need you to listen to what I've learned. The mission was based on false assumptions. The Velkari aren't primitives waiting for conquest. They're an advanced civilization that chose peace over war. They could destroy our entire fleet, but instead they're trying to teach us a better way. Taehyun's response would determine the fate of both species and the future of humanity's expansion into the galaxy. The council chamber in Lumenspire had changed overnight. Where once flowing walls created a sense of peace and harmony, now the space felt charged with tension. Dozens of Velkari leaders gathered in a circle around Jiwan, Minho, and Hana. Their crystalline forms reflected light in sharp, angry patterns. Thys stood at the center of the circle holding a small device that glowed with inner fire. Through the translation crystal, his voice carried emotions that the humans had never felt from a Velkari before. Disappointment, betrayal, and something that might have been righteous anger. We have studied your species' history, Thys began. We have learned about your wars, your genocides, your conquest of other worlds. We know what happened to the Centauri colonies, to the Jupiter mining stations, to every civilization that stood in humanity's path. The words hit Jiwan like physical blows. The Velkari had accessed Earth's historical databases and found humanity's darkest secrets. Every brutal war, every broken treaty, every act of violence in the long march to the stars was laid bare before these peaceful beings. We trusted you, another Velkari leader said. We welcomed you as friends. We shared our knowledge freely, and all the time you were planning to destroy us. Hana stepped forward, her translation crystal glowing brightly. Not all of us knew, she said desperately. Minho and I thought this was really a peaceful mission. We believed we were here to make friends. Thys turned his large eyes toward her. For a moment, the anger faded from his mental voice. We know this. We can read your thoughts and emotions. You and the scientists spoke truth when others lied, but you are only 3 among millions. Minho's hands shook as he spoke. The fleet, how many ships are coming? 237 vessels, Thys replied, carrying 500,000 humans and enough military force to conquer a dozen worlds. Your leaders call it the Verdania Colonization Initiative. Jiwan felt the weight of command crushing down on him. He was a soldier who had followed orders, but those orders had led to this moment of shame. Looking into Thys's alien features, he made a choice that would define the rest of his life. I won't lie to you anymore, he said. Yes, Earth plans to colonize your world. Yes, the fleet carries weapons and soldiers. But I've lived among your people for weeks. I've seen your kindness, your wisdom, your incredible civilization. What Earth plans to do is wrong. The chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming of the living city seemed to pause as Velkari minds processed this admission. You would betray your own species? Thais asked. I would try to save both our species, Jiwan replied. There has to be another way. Some solution that doesn't end in conquest or war. This shared the humans' words with the other Velkari leaders. Their crystalline forms flickered with rapid communication as they debated in thought speech too fast for human minds to follow. Finally, this turned back to the humans. There is something you should know about our people. Our history is not as peaceful as you believe. The chamber around them began to change. Walls became transparent, showing images of ancient Verdania. The humans saw a very different world, one torn by war between competing Velkari factions. Cities burned, armies clashed, and the planet itself suffered under the weight of endless conflict. 10,000 years ago we were like you, Thess explained. We fought over resources, territory, and ideology. We developed weapons that could crack continents and poison entire oceans. We came very close to destroying ourselves. The images showed the final war, a conflict so devastating that it left the planet nearly lifeless. The survivors faced a choice: continue fighting until nothing remained or find a new way to live. We chose peace, Thys said. Not because we were weak, but because we were strong enough to change. We abandoned war, but we did not abandon the ability to defend ourselves. The chamber floor became transparent, revealing vast spaces beneath the city. Technology that had slept for millennia was awakening. The humans saw energy conduits the size of subway tunnels, crystalline structures that pulsed with contained power, and machines that defied human understanding. The planet itself is our greatest defense, Thys continued. Verdania is not just our home, it is our partner. Every tree, every rock, every drop of water is connected to a network that spans the entire world. Minho stared at the hidden technology in amazement. The whole planet is a machine? Not a machine, Thess corrected. A living being. We merged our technology with Verdania's natural systems so completely that they became one. The planet can defend itself, and us, in ways your people cannot imagine. Jiwan felt a chill of fear for Earth's approaching fleet. What will you do when they arrive? We will try to make them understand, Thys said. But if they choose violence, Verdania will respond. Your ship's weapons will not function. Your soldiers will find their aggression replaced by empathy and peace. Your electronics will fail, your engines will stop, your military systems will shut down. You're talking about attacking the entire fleet, Jiwan said. We are talking about healing them, Thais replied. Violence is a sickness that can be cured. We learned this long ago. We will not kill your people, but we will not let them kill us either. Hana looked between the human and Velkari leaders. Captain, we have to warn them. If the fleet attacks expecting easy resistance, people will die when their systems fail. Jiwan thought about his duty to Earth, his loyalty to humanity, and his growing respect for the Velkari. The approaching fleet was full of soldiers, scientists, and colonists who thought they were bringing civilization to a primitive world. They had no idea what they were really flying into. I'll send a message to Admiral Taehyun, he decided. I'll tell him the truth about Velkari capabilities and try to convince him to negotiate instead of attack. Thys's crystalline features shifted into what humans had learned to recognize as surprise. You would warn your people about our defenses? Would try to prevent a disaster for both our species, G1 said. Maybe if they know what they're really facing, they'll be willing to talk instead of fight. The Velkari leaders communicated in rapid thought speech before Thys responded. You may send your message, but know this: if your fleet chooses violence, we will defend ourselves completely. We will not allow our people to suffer because of human aggression. Over the next several hours, Jiwan composed the most important message of his career. He told Admiral Taehyun everything: the true nature of Velkari technology, their hidden defenses, and their willingness to fight back if attacked. He recommended immediate negotiations and warned against any hostile action. The message was complete. Minho and Hana added their own report supporting Jiwon's assessment. All three humans agreed that the colonization plan was doomed to failure and would only result in unnecessary casualties. They sent the message through encrypted channels, knowing it would take hours to reach the approaching fleet. Now all they could do was wait and hope that wisdom would prevail over aggression. But as they watched Earth's ships grow larger in Verdania's sky, Jiwon feared that his warning had come too late. The fleet was already committed to their course of action. Changing direction would require Admiral Taehyun to admit that months of planning and massive resources had been wasted on a fundamentally flawed mission. The next few days would determine whether first contact between humans and Velkari would end in friendship or tragedy. And for the first time since leaving Earth, Jiwon wasn't sure which outcome was more likely. The alarm sounded just after dawn. Jiwon woke in his guest chamber aboard Lumenspire as Velkari voices filled his mind with urgent concepts. Something was wrong. He found Thys in the city's central monitoring chamber, surrounded by other Velkari who moved with unusual speed. Their normally calm demeanor had shifted to something approaching worry. "What's happening?" Jiwon asked as Hana and Minho arrived. Hana touched her translation crystal and listened to the flood of Velkari communication. Her face grew pale as she understood their message. "They've detected ships coming from Earth's direction," she said. "Big ones." Their deep space sensors picked up massive energy signatures approaching the system. Jiwon's stomach dropped, but he kept his expression neutral. "How many ships?" Thys turned to him, its crystalline features reflecting concern. Through their mental link, it shared images from their sensors. The Velkari technology could detect approaching vessels from incredible distances. What they saw coming was far larger than the small research mission they had been told to expect. "Over 200 ships," Hana translated. "The energy readings suggest vessels much larger than the Harmony. They want to know why you didn't tell them about such a large fleet." Jiwon's mind raced. The colonization fleet wasn't supposed to arrive for another month. Something had changed Earth's timeline. He needed to buy time while figuring out what to tell the Velkari. "These must be additional research vessels," he said carefully. "Earth was very excited by our reports. They probably sent more scientists to study your amazing civilization." Thys accepted this explanation, but Jiwon could sense doubt in the alien's mind. The Velkari were peaceful, not stupid. 200 ships was far more than any research mission would require. Over the next few days, tension grew throughout Velkari society. Their sensors continued tracking the approaching fleet, providing more detailed information that made their concerns worse. The ships carried massive energy signatures consistent with weapons and military equipment. Minho tried to help by explaining human technology in peaceful terms. "Our ships need powerful engines for long journeys," he said. "What you're seeing as weapons might just be our propulsion systems." But his explanation sounded weak even to him. The Velkari were advanced enough to tell the difference between engines and weapons. Their questions became more direct and harder to answer. During one particularly difficult conversation, Thys asked Jiwon directly about human military capabilities. The question came not as words, but as a flow of concepts that included violence, conflict, and warfare. Ideas the Velkari had learned from studying human thoughts. Jiwon felt sweat on his forehead as he tried to respond. "Humans have had conflicts. In our past," he admitted. "But we've moved beyond that. We come in peace." Thys seemed to accept this, but Jiwon noticed other Velkari watching him more carefully. His surface thoughts were becoming harder to hide. Images of Earth's military flashed through his mind despite his efforts to suppress them. The situation got worse when Minho accidentally mentioned the fleet's defensive capabilities during a casual conversation with Velkari scientists. He caught himself quickly, but the damage was done. The aliens had no word for defensive in the context of violence, and they asked for clarification. Hana tried to cover by explaining human caution about space travel. "We have to protect ourselves from radiation and asteroids," she said. But her translation crystal picked up the deception in her emotions and transmitted it to the Velkari. That night, Jiwon received an urgent message from the Harmony. Earth Command had accelerated their timeline because spy satellites had detected unusual activity in the Kepler system. They assumed the Velkari were preparing some kind of response to human presence. The message also contained new orders. Jiwon was to gather detailed information about Velkari population centers, resource locations, and any possible defensive capabilities. The colonization fleet needed target priorities and tactical information. Reading these orders made Jiwon feel sick. He had spent weeks with the Velkari, learning about their culture and earning their trust. They had shared their knowledge freely and welcomed humans as friends. Now Earth wanted to use that trust against them. But he was a military officer with a duty to follow orders. That night, he began systematically cataloging everything he had learned about Velkari civilization. Population numbers, city locations, resource distribution, technological capabilities. All of it went into encrypted reports sent back to the Harmony. Meanwhile, Theiss had begun his own investigation. The Velkari leader started accessing human data that had been shared during cultural exchanges. What he found there horrified him. Human history was full of violence, conquest, and genocide. Species after species had been driven to extinction by human expansion. Wars had raged across Earth for thousands of years. Even in space, humans had fought bitter conflicts over resources and territory. The concepts were so alien to Velkari thinking that Theiss had trouble understanding them at first. The idea that intelligent beings would deliberately hurt each other for gain was almost incomprehensible, but the evidence was clear and overwhelming. Theiss shared his discoveries with other Velkari leaders. Their peaceful nature made them slow to believe in human treachery, but the facts spoke for themselves. The approaching fleet was not a research mission. It was an invasion force. The Velkari began preparing, though their preparations looked nothing like human military planning. They had no weapons in any conventional sense, but their biotechnology offered other possibilities. Ancient defense systems that had slept for millennia began to stir beneath Verdania's surface. Jiwon noticed changes in Velkari behavior. They became more distant, less willing to share information. Conversations that had once flowed freely now felt forced and artificial. The aliens were hiding something, but he couldn't figure out what. The breakthrough came when Hana discovered that her translation crystal had been modified. The Velkari had upgraded it to work both ways, allowing them to read human thoughts and emotions more clearly. They knew about the deception. "Captain," she said privately, "they know we're lying to them. They've been reading our thoughts for days." Jiwon felt a chill of fear. If the Velkari knew the truth, why hadn't they confronted the humans directly? What were they planning? His answer came the next morning when Theiss requested a formal meeting with all three humans. The alien leader's crystalline form seemed dimmer than usual, and its movements carried a weight of sadness. Through their mental link, Theiss shared what he had learned about human history and the true purpose of the approaching fleet. He showed them images of human wars, conquered civilizations, and broken treaties. The evidence was devastating and undeniable. "We know why you are really here," Theiss said through Hana's crystal. "We know what your people plan to do to ours." Jiwon wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat. The Velkari had given them friendship and trust, and humans had responded with lies and plans for conquest. There was no defense for what Earth intended. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Theiss looked at him with what might have been pity. "Now we prepare for what is coming. Your people will find that Verdania is not as defenseless as they believe." For the first time since arriving on the alien world, Jiwon felt genuine fear. The Velkari had seemed so peaceful, so vulnerable. But something in Theiss's mental tone suggested that appearances could be deceiving. Earth's fleet was coming, expecting to find an easy conquest. Instead, they might be flying into a trap that none of them understood. The floating city of Lumenspire hung in the morning sky like a living jewel. Jiwon, Minho, and Hana stood on a platform that had grown from the ground overnight, watching as tendrils of light reached down to lift them gently into the air. "This is impossible," Minho whispered as they rose higher. The energy required to keep these cities airborne should be enormous, but I'm not detecting any power source. This floated beside them, its crystalline form catching the sunlight. Through their mental link, it shared amusement at human confusion. The Velkari had long ago learned to work with their world instead of against it. Their cities were alive, growing, and changing as needed. The platform carried them through an opening in the city's base. Inside, the humans found themselves in a vast space filled with flowing architecture. Walls curved and twisted like frozen water. Gardens grew in impossible places, their roots extending through living walls. Velkari moved through the space with graceful steps, their bodies reflecting the soft light that came from everywhere and nowhere. Hana worked constantly to improve communication between the species. The Velkari had given her a small crystal that helped translate their thought speech into human concepts. It wasn't perfect, but it was getting better. They want to show us how they grow things, she said, interpreting Theis's latest message. Their entire technology is based on biology. They followed Theis through corridors that reshaped themselves as they walked. The city seemed to know where they wanted to go and adjusted to help them. Soon they arrived at what could only be called a workshop, though it looked more like a garden. Velkari artisans worked with plants and crystals, encouraging them to grow into tools and structures. Minho watched in amazement as one alien guided a vine to form complex patterns, creating what looked like a computer made of living tissue. How do they control it? He asked Hana. She touched her translation crystal and shared the question with their hosts. The answer came back as a flow of concepts that made her frown. They don't control it, she said slowly. They ask it. Everything here is alive and aware on some level. They form partnerships with their tools. Jiwon watched the demonstrations with growing concern. This technology was beyond anything Earth had imagined. If the Velkari could grow computers and machines, what else could they create? His hidden recorder worked constantly, sending every detail back to the harmony. The Velkari, for their part, were equally fascinated by human technology. When Minho showed them a simple tablet computer, they gathered around it with intense curiosity. The idea of making tools from dead materials confused them, but they found the result interesting. They want to know about our cities, Hana translated. They can sense from our thoughts that we build with metal and stone. Jiwon authorized Minho to share basic information about human construction. The scientist showed holographic images of Earth cities, carefully avoiding anything that looked too military or threatening. The Velkari were surprised by human architecture. Thus sent concepts of puzzlement and slight sadness. Why did humans build such rigid structures? Why didn't they let their buildings grow and change? Tell them we haven't learned how yet, Jiwon said. Say we hope they can teach us. This response pleased the Velkari greatly. They believed in sharing knowledge freely. Over the following days, they showed their human guests more and more of their civilization. Minho studied their biotechnology with growing excitement. The Velkari could grow materials stronger than steel but lighter than plastic. Their living computers could solve problems that would take Earth's best machines years to complete. Their medical knowledge was incredible. They had eliminated disease and could heal almost any injury. Hana worked on building a more complete translation system. The Velkari language was based on emotions and concepts rather than words. They could share complex ideas instantly, while humans had to use slow, clumsy speech. But they were patient teachers, helping her understand their methods. Jiwon maintained diplomatic relations while secretly gathering intelligence. Every conversation, every tour, every demonstration was recorded and analyzed. Earth Command needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. The captain found himself genuinely liking the Velkari. They were kind, generous, and endlessly curious about human culture. They asked about human art, music, and stories. When Hana played them recordings of human music, they were fascinated by the emotional complexity. But something bothered Jiwon. The Velkari seemed almost too peaceful. In all their conversations, no one had mentioned conflict, war, or even competition. When humans tried to ask about their defenses or military, The concepts didn't translate properly. They don't have words for war, Hana explained after another failed attempt. The closest they come is a concept that means disagreement or misunderstanding. That's impossible, Minho said. Every intelligent species has to deal with resource competition, territorial disputes, something. Thais overheard this conversation and sent them images of Velkari history. Their species had indeed known conflict in the distant past, but they had evolved beyond it thousands of years ago. They had learned to share resources and resolve differences through communication and compromise. The idea seemed naive to human minds, but the evidence was all around them. Velkari society worked perfectly. Everyone had what they needed. No one fought over territory because their cities could move and grow as required. Problems were solved through cooperation, not competition. During their third week on Verdania, Jiwan received a coded message from the Harmony. Earth Command was pleased with their reports. The Velkari technology was even more valuable than hoped. Plans were being made to send a much larger expedition. The message made Jiwan uncomfortable. He was beginning to understand that the Velkari truly were peaceful. They trusted humans completely and shared their knowledge freely. They had no idea that Earth might want to take rather than trade. Late that night, as he stood on a balcony, overlooking the alien landscape, Jiwan felt this approach. The Velkari leader had been spending more time with the humans, seemingly fascinated by their different way of thinking. Through their mental link, Thys shared curiosity about human emotions. Velkari felt things differently than humans did. They experienced harmony and peace as positive states, but they were intrigued by human concepts like ambition, competition, and determination. Jiwan tried to explain human nature without revealing too much. He talked about the drive to explore, to build, to achieve great things, but he carefully avoided mentioning humanity's darker impulses. Thys seemed to accept these explanations, but Jiwan sensed deeper questions forming in the alien's mind. The Velkari were not stupid. They could read surface thoughts and emotions. How long before they discovered what the humans were really thinking about? As the alien sun set over Lumenspire, Jiwan made his report to the Harmony. Everything was proceeding perfectly. The Velkari trusted them and were sharing technology freely. There were no signs of military capabilities or defenses. But even as he sent these words, doubt gnawed at him. The Velkari had been nothing but kind and welcoming. They deserved better than betrayal. Unfortunately, Earth Command had already made their decision. The colonization fleet was coming, whether the Velkari wanted it or not. The stars looked different from here. Captain Jiwan stood on the bridge of the Harmony, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. After 18 months of travel, they had finally reached Kepler 442b. The scientists back on Earth had been right. This world was alive. Captain, we're getting readings from the surface, said Minho from his station. The young scientist's voice carried excitement he tried to hide. There are cities down there. Big ones. Jiwan nodded slowly. They all knew what this meant. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. After centuries of searching, they had found intelligent life. The weight of history pressed down on everyone aboard the ship. Any signs they've noticed us? Jiwan asked. Hana looked up from her communications console. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she checked different frequencies. Nothing yet, Captain, but we're still pretty far out. Maybe they just haven't seen us. The Harmony moved closer to the planet. From the outside, it looked like a peaceful research ship. Its white hull gleamed in the light of the alien sun. Solar panels and scientific equipment covered the outer sections. Anyone looking at it would see exactly what Earth wanted them to see. A small exploration vessel on a mission of discovery. The crew of 50 people moved quietly through the corridors. They wore simple blue uniforms with no military markings. Their equipment looked basic, designed for research and peaceful contact. Everything had been planned perfectly. Captain, Minho called out again, you need to see this. The main screen changed to show a close-up view of the planet's surface. What they saw took their breath away. Massive structures floated in the sky above vast forests. These weren't built from metal or stone like human cities. They seemed to be alive, glowing, with soft light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Are those organic?" Hana whispered. "They have to be," Minho said. "Look at the way they move. They're not just floating. They're actually flowing through the air." Jiwan studied the alien cities. Beautiful was the only word that came to mind. They looked like giant flowers or jellyfish drifting through the atmosphere. Thin bridges of light connected them to each other and to structures on the ground. "Any life signs?" the captain asked. "Thousands," Minho replied. "Maybe millions. The energy readings are incredible. These beings use technology we can barely understand." A soft alarm sounded. Hana's console lit up with new signals. "Captain, they're trying to contact us," she said. "It's not radio or laser communication. This is something else. The signal is coming directly to our ship, but I don't know how they're doing it." Jiwan felt a chill run down his spine. The aliens had found them much faster than expected. "Can you understand any of it?" Hana shook her head. "Not yet, but the pattern is mathematical. Basic sequences, prime numbers, geometric progressions, they're trying to establish communication." "Respond with the same patterns," Jiwan ordered. "Let them know we understand." The next few hours passed slowly. The Harmony continued its approach while Hana worked to decode the alien signals. Gradually, simple mathematical concepts gave way to more complex ideas. The aliens were patient, teachers building understanding one step at a time. "Captain," Hana said finally, "I think they want to meet us. They're sending coordinates for a landing site." Jiwan looked at the planet below. Everything depended on what happened next. "Prepare the shuttle. Small team only. You, me, and Minho. Full peaceful protocols." The shuttle bay opened, and their small craft descended toward the alien world. The atmosphere was thick but breathable. Sensors showed the air was even cleaner than Earth's. As they flew toward the coordinates, more details of the alien civilization became clear. The floating cities were even more beautiful up close. They pulsed with colors that changed like slow music. Streams of light flowed between buildings like rivers of starfire. The aliens had created something that was both technology and art. Their landing site was a clearing in a vast forest. The trees were enormous, their trunks wide enough to hold human buildings. Strange flowers glowed with their own light, creating pools of soft color in the shadows. As the shuttle touched down, figures emerged from the forest. Jiwan, Hana, and Minho stepped out to meet them. The aliens were tall and graceful, standing, nearly 8 feet high. Their bodies seemed to be made of living crystal that caught and reflected light in amazing patterns. They moved with fluid motions, almost like they were dancing. Their faces were hard to read, but their large eyes seemed kind. One of them stepped forward. Without speaking, images appeared in the humans' minds. Not words, but concepts and feelings. Welcome, peace, curiosity. Jiwan felt his thoughts being touched gently. It didn't hurt, but it was strange. The alien was reading his surface thoughts and emotions. He tried to project back feelings of friendship and peaceful intent. The lead alien's crystalline features seemed to shift into what might have been a smile. More images flowed between them. The alien showed them pictures of its people, their cities, their way of life. Everything spoke of harmony and peace. Minho gasped as knowledge flowed into his mind. The aliens called themselves the Velkari. They had lived on this world for thousands of years, building their civilization without war or conflict. They had been watching the stars, hoping to meet other intelligent life. Hana received different information. The Velkari had no spoken language as humans understood it. They shared thoughts and emotions directly. They found human speech interesting but primitive. The lead Velkari touched Jiwan's mind again. This time, the captain sensed a name or identity. This. The alien leader welcomed them to Verdania as they called their world. For hours, the 3 humans sat with the Velkari in the forest clearing. They shared basic information about their species and worlds. The aliens were fascinated by human creativity and the way they used tools. Humans were amazed by Velkari biotechnology and their peaceful nature. As the alien sun set, painting the sky in purple and gold, Thais invited them to visit the floating cities. The humans accepted gratefully, their minds already spinning with the possibilities of what they might learn. But as they prepared to leave, Jiwan felt a cold weight in his stomach. Hidden in his uniform was a small device that recorded everything they saw and heard. Every few hours it sent encrypted reports back to the Harmony, and from there to Earth. The Velkari trusted them completely. They had no idea what was really coming.